What?
You. Barging in here, trying to figure out if we're up to something. It's nice.
Are you up to something?
See? Like old times.
Hello, Hammad. My name is Brian Mendenhall. I'm an animation supervisor at Tippet Studio in Berkeley. I've been there for about 15 years. Most recently, we've been working on a lot of pilots and television shows. We worked on Lemony Snicket. We just did Ted 2. Before that, there was Ted 1, Enchanted, Spiderwick. We worked on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Anyway, like I said, I've been there a long time, so the list just sort of goes on and on and on into the past. So I'm here to give you a little critique of your 11-second club entry. Overall, I think that it's looking really good. There's a lot of nice motions in it. The poses are clear. You can definitely tell, for the most part, what's going on, which isn't always a given. In particular, I like this last little bit here. This guy's...
See? Like old times.
That guy's last little gesture that he does there is by far one of my favorites, and I'll go into why I think that a little bit later. And just for the sake of people who are watching this, from without any context, let's just play it once so that everybody can see it.
What?
You. Barging in here, trying to figure out if we're up to something. It's nice.
Are you up to something?
See? Like old times.
Cool. I'll turn the volume down after that. So these types of assignments can get a little bit challenging to critique. Usually a shot will either fill a need, like it's a part of a bigger picture. The characters need to match what the characters are in other shots. The aesthetic of a particular picture, like if you've seen, even different animated features from different companies, they all have a different aesthetic, and what they're going for, changes movie to movie. Or it's just an academic assignment, in which case we're probably trying to demonstrate a particular principle of body mechanics or a particular principle of acting or animation, and so there's an easy sort of pass or fail to go off of from that. But for just personal tests like this, a lot of it just comes down to aesthetics or personal choice. So I'll try to avoid putting my personal aesthetics onto it, what I would have done, and try to be a little bit broader with my description of what I think is successful and non-successful within this shot. So we'll start broad, and then I'll give you some more specific notes. In the broad sense, what I think that this assignment could benefit from overall is more of a sense of what I like to call regard. Now, in large terms, poses, what I see here is a lot of poses that I would consider to be cliche. And cliche is another one of those like bad words that we know it's bad, but a lot of people have different definitions of it. Specifically, when I see a cliche, when I say that a pose is cliche, what I'm speaking about mostly is that it feels like a number of different characters could have done this pose, and they could have done it any time within a number of different circumstances. What really makes a pose choice and an acting choice really sing, even in a little assignment like this, is to take your character's very specific and unique situation and derive your poses from that concept. Don't let your character just go into what is a, by default, like clear, straight out of a Richard Williams book pose, when you could give it a little bit of an edge that has to do with this situation, which has never happened before and will never happen again, and bringing that to light is what usually will give something a sort of a natural, interesting, and unique feel to it. So I'm always looking for moments where I can do things like that. The other thing, which is sort of a broader sense, is that your two characters, and this again goes to aesthetics, but your two characters feel stiff. It's essentially, they could be sitting down and going through these exact same gestures. Like you didn't have a character take a step or really change posture at all through the shot. And what that does is it kind of creates a lack of contrast between the two guys, where you could, and I have nothing wrong with it being, subtle and a little bit rigid, like if that's the acting choice, but it's like we need to make that clear and make that what's going on, like we're trying to build tension through a lack of motion, whereas every little thing that everybody does is really important, or that's not necessarily the point of the shot, and we need to push it so that we can feel like the two characters are definitely diametrically opposite people. The the overall strategy there is that it has to be one or the other. And this is sort of falling in the middle where I don't feel like there is a contrast between the characters, but I also don't feel like the animation is downplayed enough that that's sort of the point. Like, you know, a standoff, like, or poker players, where both people are trying to not give anything away. So obviously we don't have a contrasting character because they're both trying to emote as little as possible. That could be a very interesting exercise, but we're not there, and we're also not like all the way in like, you know, Mike and Sully or something where they're just like so different in everything that they do that they're interesting to look at on screen. So this is the broad idea, trying to get less cliched pose and possibly introduce a little bit more contrast to your characters. And let me just speak specifically about the things that I see one by one. So this first shot for me is still just a bit awkward. I somehow I can feel like a struggle here with staging, possibly. Like you were there's like a lot of things that you're trying to do in one shot without making it too crazy. But for me, like these guys are just too close to this edge. You know what I mean? And there's a slow zoom in, which actually brings them closer. So it looks like we're almost panning off of these characters. Like because of the camera move, I feel like I'm supposed to be focusing on these guys. Like we're going to end up over here. So then when we come, so just they're fighting for attention so much on this in this staging that I don't know instantly what to look at. And you'll hear that a lot in a lot of animation critiques. You need instant recognition. People should never be confused about what they're supposed to be looking at, and there's a ton of different strategies for that. But for me, like, if you could, like, honestly, if you wanted to show these guys over here, which to me are, you know, completely irrelevant, like it doesn't matter to the acting assignment to me at all, you could literally start the shot framed like this, you know what I mean? And I wouldn't have missed, hey, what are these guys talking about? But if you really want to show these guys, is it possible, had you ever considered, like, maybe starting the framing over on them and panning the whole shot over to the left? Because if the shot was literally panning over to the left, then we definitely know that we're starting to focus on these guys. And when we get over to them, you know, give these guys, you know, the rule of thirds in composition, right? Get these guys to stand around the, you know, the third of the frame as opposed to, you know, as opposed to being so weighted over to the left. The very center of the frame is completely blank. So anyway, I think there's a lot we could do with that camera angle just to get possibly an emotional impact of what's going on. Though to me, the emotional impact from the beginning is a mystery, so that's easy to do. But mostly just tell the audience what they're supposed to be looking for. So this guy's initial what? I personally think it's way too big. Like what I would like is to know what this guy is thinking. The other guy, I don't necessarily need to know what he's thinking because he's obviously being mysterious. This guy, I'd like to know if he's nervous or if he's like, if he's friendly with this guy, if he just met this guy. I want to be able to know that from the very, very beginning. And this gesture that he does, this is the first one that I would say, like a guy going, what, and doing a head down and then a head up and the arms up and the arms down. That kind of gesture, it definitely reads as a character saying what, but it could be thrown into any character saying what about anything anywhere. It doesn't give me anything about this particular shot. I showed this shot to everybody at the studio, just, you know, for fun. No pressure there. And one of them had come up with the suggestion that, is it possible that this guy, they aren't actually facing each other? It would break up the staging a little bit, first of all, just to not have two guys standing looking at each other. Neither one ever takes a step in either direction, and they end the shot still just staring at each other. And it might give this guy a natural sense of nervousness if instead of like him like actually looking at the guy, he's like trying to not look at him for a little bit, and then he just notices the guy's just staring him down, like he can feel that heat of that guy staring on the side of his face, and then he's just like, what? You know what I mean? Like much smaller, like he's like we get the idea that he's trying to not say what, like why is this guy staring at me, but he just can't take it anymore. It feels like that's what you're doing, but if you're nervous about somebody staring you down and you eventually have to say what, you don't just sit there staring at them and then go, what? You know what I mean? Even though he's like looking down and then he looks up and then he goes into it, like even if you kept the staging the same, I think it would be more powerful if the character was just, if he's just standing there looking off and he's just like, what? You know, like, you know, it's just like he acts meek, he seems meek, knows that he's a meek character the entire time. So for me, that's like, going back to what I was saying about regard, the idea of regard is that whenever a character is in a particular situation, you don't lose regard for that situation. Like, if you put him in a situation where he's trying to not look at him, then you can get a very unique, like, what? Just based on, like, where his body is facing as opposed to his head, where the guy is, why he's saying what, and what he's actually thinking in that moment. Whereas this is a guy standing and then doing, like, a twinned sort of generic what pose. It just doesn't give as much. And again, going back to what I said in the beginning, I don't think that it's unsuccessful. Like, there's a lot of beauty in this sequence of shots, and there's a lot of clarity. So it's not a fail. I'm just giving you things to to think about, pushing it further. And that's the other thing that makes these things a little bit hard to critique is, like, I don't actually expect you to hit any of these notes because it's lit. Like, you clearly you've spent plenty of time on it. You clearly consider this final. It's more notes I'm giving you for your next assignment to think about from the very planning stages, from the very blocking stage. I think that this first gesture that this guy does is too big. Like, he's like, again, it's the same thing where it's like, you. If he's the intense and subtle and staring at the guy, why is he doing a big looping gesture, that makes him look like he's... The two poses that you've given me here almost indicate that this guy is actually annoyed to the point that he's about to lose control. Like, he was cool for a while, and the guy says, what? And he's like, you, coming in here, blah, blah, blah. Like, he's about to go into this whole thing, like, just totally break character, but he doesn't. He pulled it back and he stays calm. I'd love for him to stay calm the whole time. And in a sense of regard, the fact that he's here, and he ends up here. Like, this is a pose of a guy holding a cigarette, and this is a pose of a guy holding a cigarette. But neither of them feel like they're necessarily connected. You just wanted to go to this pose. If you want to go to this pose, that's fine. If you want to start from this pose, that's fine. But I want to feel like the two poses are connected. So for me, it'd be more like, he's got the cigarette in his mouth and he wants to say you. He's like, you. You see how I just, like, the fact that this gesture of me saying you shows that I had a cigarette in my mouth just a minute ago. You know what I mean? This is you. Regard for this pose. And if this is the pose that you want to end up in, you could have him start in a pose, you could back solve it and try to have him start in a pose where he's more like you, where it feels like the two poses have regard for each other. It's not like I'm smoking a cigarette here, I'm holding a cigarette over here. And that pose is the same thing. Like, it's very clear. He breaks he breaks out of his posture and he goes in for something like this. It looks like he's about to get really, again, it looks like he's about to lose control. He's about to really lay into this guy. But then he immediately goes back to where he was. So this pose, let me bring it up on the screen here. Oops, sorry. Which is perfectly fine, and it's nice to change posture every now and then, but you don't change posture unless there's an actual emotional change. And this guy, from what I'm hearing and from what you do with him, it seems like he's in the same emotional state the entire time. So this pose just feels like, other than the fact that his brows are a bit furrowed, it feels like a guy explaining something to somebody angrily from any shot ever. You know what I mean? Like, the fact that he's holding a cigarette is almost irrelevant. There's got to be a pose that we can put in there that feels like it's a little bit more in regard to where he came from and where he's going. Like, you barging in here. You know what I mean? Like, I don't put the hand all the way up. If I want to do the hand on the hip, like, that's just part of his thing. You barging in here, asking me blah, 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 blah. Like, at least I still am, this hand pose on the cigarette still feels like it was this hand pose. And it comes out as at least a little bit more unique than just this big leaning forward open hand gesture. And he goes right back to the cigarette. And so, yeah, if he was already had the cigarette there, him going right back to smoking the cigarette wouldn't feel like such a big change. I would say that those three poses have what I would call just like too much energy, like too many resets, or what I call them. A reset is when a character it's like the opposite of having regard, where the character essentially puts themselves into a default pose and then goes into whatever pose they feel like going into next. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to be in this pose, and then I'm going to reset, and then I can be in this pose, rather than going from this pose and then going right into this pose with some regard for where you were and creating a unique pose. It's just like, I'm in this pose, now I'm in this pose, then I wanted to be in this pose, then I wanted to be in this pose, then I needed to be in this pose. And you're just hitting all three poses which is just creating a lot of unnecessary action. This is, again, a matter of taste. Listening to the audio and watching this guy, this audio sounds like an inhale when he's exhaling. Again, obviously not something that I couldn't be talked out of, but if I had this shot earlier in blocking, I think that you have plenty of time to actually have the guy go take the cigarette up to his lips, inhale for a little bit, and then when he exhales, or he inhales for a little bit, and then in the next shot where we just see the smoke come out with no audio cue, and it's almost even on the line where he says, it's nice, right? He's just exhaling and saying it's nice, and that's when the smoke is coming out. Then we wouldn't feel like this character, because I mean, I don't have to tell you, there's no way he got that much smoke in his mouth in that tiny little time that cigarette was there to blow out that big puff of smoke into the guy's face, right? Just barely kisses it and all this smoke comes out. So I would have that inhale sound there be the actual inhale. We cut to this shot and we see the smoke come out and we hear him say nice and we know what happened. You know what I mean? We don't need to see him actually blowing the smoke out. And then that are you up to something? The blowing the smoke out is fine. The staging of this shot is a little bit odd to me because it looks like we've suddenly gone to almost a POV of the other guy. Like we already developed a staging for these two guys as like a 3/4 here, and then this one feels like our character needs to be more over to the left and looking to the right. You know what I mean? Because it looks like he's looking right into camera all of a sudden. But other than that, this is another example. Are you up to something? It feels like, you know, there's a natural tendency to hit the beats on all the loudest words, which is usually the way that I'll start blocking out an acting assignment as well. But I feel like you've hit too many of them here. Let me turn the volume up so we can hear it again.
It's nice.
Are you up to something?
Like, are you up to something? I hear are as being a loud word, like, are you up to something? But something doesn't hit me as a word that's strong enough to elicit an entire pose change. So it's like you've got two beats in here where he's like,
are you up to something?
Are you up to something? And on something you had to do a pose change because it felt like it was a strong enough word. But to me it's just like, are you up to something? It's just like, are is where you hit the big pose change, and then the rest of it you just let it play out. Are you up to something? Like that, to me, feels a lot stronger than just throwing in a pose change for the sake of a pose change. Are you up to something? Like, it feels just overacted to me.
See? Like old times.
See, and that's why this part is so great, because everything that he does is regarding this same pose. This is a man holding a cigarette who, you know, when you have a cigarette, you smoke it, you take you know, drags off of it. And this moment here where he's coming in,
see, like old times.
He almost takes a drag of it, and then he decides to react to what the guy's saying instead, but without, you know, he doesn't go, see, like old times. You know what I mean? He doesn't, like, go into another big, different gesture just to say, like old times. Everything regards what he was doing. He comes in, he's about to take a puff, he gets interrupted, and then he just brings his hand away to say the, like old times. You know what I mean? So, like, that's why this, which is great to have something in your shot that you can reference, this gesture here, I feel, has a really great sense of regard, very unique, and very appealing and natural because of that, whereas other things feel like we're just pulling a gesture from anywhere. Like, I'd love to see your reference to see how, if you would have naturally acted these things out in that way. Because I would imagine not. Like, you get yourself in the character, you get yourself in the situation, and then you just try to act. Try to hit, like, you know, nice, natural, theatrical or movie poses, and I don't think you'd be hitting these same sort of cartoony beats like,
are you up to something?
Like that, if you were to actually act it out. Whereas this, I could see coming definitely straight out of reference from almost like, you know, a great actor. You know what I mean? Like, this is a reason that, you know, it's a sort of a standard acting trope to be doing something while you're acting, because it just gives you like this split attention that allows you to do natural things like you would be doing in real life. But also, it's become a sort of a trope in animation tests where it's like, don't have your guy just standing there. Always give them a secondary thing to do. That's almost become cliche itself for these acting tests, but it does deliver to us immediately a lot of these really nice, unique, regarded pose changes that come out of something natural rather than just being, you know, a sad pose, a happy pose, an angry pose. So it's the fact that he's smoking a cigarette has given you a great tool for that stuff. I would utilize it more. I think you utilized it really great in this last post, but think about that as a process for blocking out or developing your next acting shot, and I think it will only get better and better. Cool. So I've hit 20 minutes, so that's probably enough for me. Have a great day, and keep animating.